Hello. I'll say that again. I'm Fenla Balm. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Civic Actions. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the joy of Agile security government compliance. Before I start, I'd just like to know, I'm going to get into this later, so I'm not going to explain it now, but how many people here, by show of hands, know what an ATO is? Oh, that's great. That's great. That's more than half the people.
I don't think we'd be here.
Yeah. So let's see if the slides work. There we go. So we're going to go over how I got here a little bit. What is Civic Actions? And we're going to give a little history of what is compliance and how it got to be where it is. And then we're going to actually, the meat of the talk is going to be about how we're trying to make compliance a little bit more fun, or a little bit more secure, maybe, might be the right word. We'll talk a little bit about the culture of security that we're trying to create at Civic Actions and through all our clients, and some next steps. So I've always had an interest in privacy and security. And this started out in '77 when I was working with Ron Rivest and Adi Shamir. That's R and S of RSA. They were working on knapsack algorithms and later became public key cryptography. I wrote my thesis at MIT called Newspeak. It was a personalized newspaper. The idea was to actually allow people to modify, to create search filters on their own, pull in the information they want, and then comment on it and pass it to other people that they know. So it's kind of a Facebook before Facebook. But one of the things I had in it though was I was very concerned about privacy implications. If Big Brother had access to your personalized information, that could be bad. So that's why it was called Newspeak. It was a peek at the news and also a play on the word newspeak from George Orwell. Coined the term broadcatch. I worked with John Perry Barlow and John Gilmore and Mitch Kapoor starting the EFF. I ran a cypherpunk remailer, which was like what was before Tor. Tor is the onion router. I don't know what T stands for. Maybe it's the onion router. But it's a way for communicating privately without people being able to track you. Worked a bit at Oasis on the Extensible Resource Identifier, XRI. And in 2005, found Civic Actions. Civic Actions it does free software-based digital services that take into account a commitment to remote work, mindfulness, and balance. It was started in 2004 in Berkeley. I was living in San Francisco at the time. For the first 10 years, we worked at empowering at the edges. The concept was to support and empower nonprofits that were making positive change. We actually had about a client list of about 100 different nonprofits. In 2014, we decided to go for the work from the inside and work at trying to transform government from the inside. And so doing this in the security realm is a great place to make transformation. It needs it. And some of the agencies we serve are listed here. I'm not going to go into them. I'm not really supposed to talk about Civic Actions much, so. So now I'll talk a little bit about the history of compliance. A lot of you may already know some of this, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. Actually, it started in '95 with the British Standards BS 7799, which was pretty amazingly prescient. It's actually, its latest revision was just a couple years ago. It was, 95 was actually very early in the internet days. It was actually, in my remembrance, it's the first time that dollar signs could be on the internet, because before that the internet was research only, and if you tried to sell something on the internet, people would boo you off. And so 95 was pretty early for this kind of, for actually developing code of practice for information security management. But then the next year we got the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which defines the lawful use and disclosure of personal health information. Sarbanes-Oxley, of course, came along, which protects investors from accounting errors and fraudulent practices. The payment card industry, this is not a law, This is something that all the credit card companies decided we got to be careful about how we handle data. And they just, it's a voluntary system, but I think I don't know of any credit card system that doesn't follow the PCI DSS. And I already mentioned how this was just a prescient system, BS 7799, which is now, you may have heard of ISO 2700 and 27000, and that's basically the same thing. Along the way, FISMA became law in 2002. I'm going to focus a bit on FISMA because FISMA is the law that's still governing government security compliance for federal systems. I'm also going to talk about the ATO, which a lot of you know about. It's the authority to operate. It's required before a federal system can go online. It's granted after a complete security compliance review consisting of probably, depending on how you're rated, approximately 300 security controls. And traditionally, the process takes 9 months to a year or more to accomplish. And then once you get the ATO, you get granted it for a 3-year cycle, which really does not make sense at all. It made sense in 2002 because systems were updated on an 18-month schedule. But these days, where systems are being updated on an 18-minute schedule, and also with all the changes that are happening in the threat landscape out there, it just doesn't make sense anymore. With automation, we're now able, at Civic Actions, we've been able to make an ATO in 4 months. And our goal before the end of the year is to do one in 2 weeks. The government does realize there's some problems with this very static system, and so the Department of Homeland Security came out with the CDM, which a lot of people consider the Continuous Monitoring Act. It basically requires using several commercial off-the-shelf tools to perform an ongoing automated search for known cyber flaws. It uses systems like HBSS and ACAS. These are Windows-based and proprietary. One of the problems with that is a lot of certainly all the servers we use are GNU Linux-based, and most of the servers on the net now are Linux-based, but the tools you need to use to test them and secure them are Windows-based. And they have Windows blobs that they require us to put into our Linux system, but personally they scare me because they're out of date. They get updated about every 3 or 4 months, and systems change, and bugs are found a lot quicker than that. And I think that they are one of the major security holes in the systems that I build. But they're required by law or by the client. Yeah, so since I already mentioned that most servers run GNU Linux these days, friends don't let friends do Windows, I'll just say that. FISMA modernization also came out in 2014, but it really didn't do much other than to enable better response to cyber attacks. 2015, NIST 853 R4 came out. That's revision 4. NIST is the National Institute of Science and Standards and Technology. They provide a suite of documents that you may be familiar with. They generally start with the number 800, and those define the security and compliance requirements and regulations required of public sector federal systems. This document 853 is the source book of security compliance. It actually has those 300 controls I was talking about in it, and so you have to go through those and see what they are. Those 300 controls are grouped in families. There's 18 main families. Access control is AC family. Physical environment is the PE family. We're not going to go into those too much, but just want to mention there's 18 families to begin with that were defined. So then, anyway, how did I end up here after all that? In 2015, when we got into the federal space, Civic Actions needed a Chief Information Security Officer, and well, I was the last person to take a step backwards. So I ended up here. I also have heard that the S in CISO, when things go wrong, stands for scapegoat. Hopefully I never find out about that, but I've heard that's the case. And in 2016, I wrote my first system security plan. The system security plan is the document you have to write. It's a main document for getting a ATO for an authority to operate. And I wrote my first system security plan for a DoD ATO using the FISMA and RMF methods. It was a 400-page document filled with, it's a completely static system. They actually, what they want for proof that systems, that some configuration is correct is a screenshot, which again, you could Photoshop a screenshot. This thing was a monster. I definitely never, it was, and if you look at all the 853, 800, 137, 800, all the regulations, plus you add the FIPS regulations and everything else onto it, there's about 6,000 pages of regulations that are required to actually, that are sort of background for this, and nobody reads that. Nobody actually even, I don't think, reads the ATO, the 400 pages. I mean, nobody's going to read that. What I do believe that the ATO, the authorizing officials do, is they have their current favorite 5 or 6 controls, and they'll go to those controls, check those out, and maybe ask you a question about 1 or 2 of them. But they don't. No one reads the whole thing, and yet this is what our system's about. I vowed never to do that again, and through the process, I learned that despite all those controls and all those systems that it seems like government's working on this and doing a good job. It seems like it from the outside, but compliance is not security. Compliance is checkboxes, and I would like to actually build secure systems. And the government is starting to catch on, and they're updating risk management. While FISMA is the law of federal government agencies have to protect information systems, have to follow, OMBA 130 says how they should go about it. And it's the first time that they actually said, use the 800 series documents to make your system secure. Oh, actually, I'll just go back there for a moment. So just to bring your attention, it also used the words ongoing authorization for the first time. That's a really good thing. Actually, I think that phrase ongoing authorization is in there about 90 times. So they're definitely trying to bring that idea up, and that's a good step forward. At least talking about it. But government moves slowly. I'll briefly mention we're mostly government here, but if you're in the private sector and you're not mandated to use FISMA, the NIST cybersecurity framework is very good. It's easy to read. It's voluntary. It's got clear language, and it's a good system to read and follow if you want to make sure your system is if you want to. I was going to say if you want to make sure your system's secure, but no one can make sure their system's secure. But if you want to maybe make sure you haven't forgotten a few things. Actually, brief interlude. I was at the RSA conference a few years ago, and there was a talk with CISOs, and so I was in the talk, and there were about maybe 100 people in the room, and the guy at the front said he held up a $100 bill, and I said, I'll give anyone this $100 bill if they believe their system won't be hacked in the next week. And no one took his $100. So it's a difficult process, but we're trying to make it easier. Also, just in December of last year, 853 revision version 2 came out. It will be followed with 853 revision 5. Hard to keep track of all the numbers, but these changes actually brought on a lot of new things. It embraces private industry more, and it emphasizes privacy. In fact, privacy is something we all think is very important. It has this privacy overlay in it that becomes part of it. 8 new controls added to the 18 families for privacy, and very, very good to have these in there. Overall, the cybersecurity scope is rapidly expanding. We've got laws like CCPA that grants consumers the right to know what information companies like Facebook and Google are collecting on them and how they're using it and who they're sharing it with. Lots of things to watch for. Fortunately, endpoint security is improving. but the system security plans, the monster is still too static. Part of the reason is cultural. The authorizing officials who ask for your SSO, for your system security plan SSP, they are using systems like EMAS and CSAM, and the other one is RSAM, which now Galvanize. They require their documentation in Word or sometimes in PDF. And they don't have any APIs for putting the data into them. So there's no way, even if you had an automatic system to feed information into them, you can't do it. And so what do you do? Well, we understand responsive design. When you build a site, everybody here at the Drupal, all the Drupalers know, when you build a site, it's got to run on your cell phone, it's got to run on a big screen, small screen, everywhere. What we really need is responsive security, agile security. So the system security plan, automating automating the building of the system security plan is where we're focused right now. We start with a base of nice tools like OpenControl, Ansible, OpenSCAP, OWASP Zap, Chef and Spec, and Docker. There's some really good tools. Like if you don't know OpenSCAP, it's basically similar to Nessus. And it's free, and oftentimes it's actually ahead of Nessus in its use of DISA STIGs. I'm using DISA STIGs are the Security Technical Implementation Guides from the Department of Defense. DISA stands for Defense Information Security Agency, I believe. One of the bad things, if you're involved in security at all, it's all acronyms. If I say some acronym or something that you don't know, please raise your hand and ask. And actually, if you have any other questions at any time, please feel free to ask.
I actually have a question. You mentioned Docker on there. Have you had any issues with DoD STIGs and getting Docker containers past agencies who don't understand them?
We're involved with doing that right now. The Amazon ECS it is Docker based, and it is FedRAMP approved. And so we're using that. Okay. We're crossing our fingers. We have not got an ATO yet using it, but we're working on it.
Sorry.
No problem. We leverage the ability to inherit controls whenever possible. This is great when you can inherit a control because then you don't have to document and show how you use it. For example, in AWS, FedRAMP allows you to inherit the entire MP set of controls, which are the media protections, so which basically make it so that when a disk breaks, you're supposed to drill holes through it and destroy it. You don't have to worry about that because Amazon handles all that. If you're at the Amazon East or West where they are FedRAMP compliant, not all Amazon does that, but the Amazon has some FedRAMP compliant sites. Amazon also has GovCloud, which is FedRAMP compliant, so it does the same thing. And if you're building a low impact platform, we're working on this with this right now. There's FedRAMP tailored, which this LISAAS is the low impact software as a service system. If you're building anything like that that's going to be creating software as a service, you may be able to get FedRAMP tailored, which allows you to inherit a whole bunch more controls, but you have to go through the FedRAMP process with that. We're working with that on a client with GSA. So some of the steps we're going is trying to share control information. Traditionally, the creators of system security plans are isolated. They don't share any information with each other, and we're proposing creating a set of public templates that anyone can use for creating a baseline of a system security plan. We're using OpenControl. It provides a suite of tools for managing compliance controls that are based in YAML. I love the acronym YAML, yet another markup language. And OSCAL just is now a new system by NIST. We're working with them, and there's OSCAL is the Open Security Controls Assessment Language. it's hard for me to quite understand exactly. There's a lot of overlap between Open Control and OSCAL, but OSCAL has some things that Open Control doesn't yet, and Open Control has things that OSCAL doesn't yet. I'm not really sure how they're both going to play out, but right now we're keeping our eyes on both of them, and we're mostly using Open Control, and there's a thing called OSCAL Kit on GitHub, which converts Open Control YAML to OSCAL YAML, or OSCAL JSON, same thing. We're looking at building reusable components. As I mentioned, if you're using Drupal, Drupal has a set of things that are same on pretty much every system. If you're using AWS brings in a set of similar things on every system. So we should be able to template those, and actually we're doing that. We've got a reusable component library we've got right now. We've got 5 components in there: AWS, Civic Actions, Drupal, Privacy, and SSH. I was hoping to have at least one of these out on GitHub. Right now they're in a private GitLab, but they're just not ready yet. But these will be out on either the Open Control GitHub or the Compliance as Code GitHub real soon now. We're working to get them out there. We just are doing a little bit more testing, making sure that we've got any proprietary information out of them, and that they're general purpose and they're able to be used.
So when you say reusable, like, is this like FISMA secured, and you could just sort of modify it and use it like a template, or? Kind of.
I'll show a little bit more of that.
Okay.
So I'm going to go into that, and let me know if I don't answer your question.
Okay.
So here's like the AWS control in. This is a editor. This is actually this was created directly from reading the YAML files, which I'll show also in a moment. And this shows that AWS is on the left side. There's 17 of the 18 control families it manages. 103 controls it touches. Most of the controls say this control is partially inherited by FedRAMP. But there's an AC1, which is the access control policy, because FedRAMP has an access control policy. For Drupal doesn't have an AC1 because Drupal follows the access control policy of some other system, usually the access control policy of the agency building the system. So now we'll see some of the machine readable Open Control. It's a big step having this machine readable so that any system can, so that machines can both read and write the information. We also having it in Git makes it so that you have change control automatically, instead of having a Word document v1.1-final really final really final. This shows the access control family, control key AC2 for account management. We see it mentions that Drupal provides user accounts of types anonymous user, authenticated user, and administrator. You could actually build an automated system to read this section, pull out automated user, authenticated user, and administrator, and ensure that those are that they're there and that you don't have any other user types. Or if you do have other user types, you can take this template and add your user types. Here we see on the right-hand side under Drupal, we can see exactly what I was just saying, the anonymous user, authenticated user, and administrator. There's also, under AWS, there's 2 types. We have a reporter and an administrator, and under SSH, we have a developer and a system administrator. So these are different components that feed into a single system security plan for AC2 account management. On the left-hand side is that's actually directly from the NIST 853 risk management framework. That's called the guidance on the left-hand side. So in part A, the guidance says, identifies and selects the following types of information system accounts. And so we list the system account types. Going to step back a moment, we're doing for Drupal. We're working on creating the documentation for keeping Drupal secure. There's been work in the open control community to automate the process of ensuring that a Drupal installation is compliant with the NIST security controls. There's a listing here of some modules like automated logout helps with AC12 system termination. These are all, by the way, this was written for Drupal 7. It's up on the Compliance as Code site. We, of course, welcome any pull requests if somebody wants to update this for Drupal 8. But you can see, for example, Security Kit in the middle there handles helps with SC4, partially manages SC4, SC8, SC11, and SC23. There's also documentation in a basic MD file, which actually I don't have a slide for, which basically has those controls and example documentation that could be pulled into a system security plan for those controls. And we're actually looking at pulling in some of this documentation, automating it into the system that we're currently building. And we're also updating this. So which brings us to the automated document creation. From those Git YAML, by the way, am I covering your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good. From those Git YAML files, this is directly generated Markdown file. At the top is the NIST 853 guidance, and underneath is the text. Running this through a simple system like Pandoc, you can create the Word documents. This is what I actually feed up to the EMAS system that the government wants. And something that we're working with, one of the things we're doing at OSCAL is, besides the controls, the meat of a system security plan, of the 400-page monster I was talking about, 300 pages are the security controls and the documentation for them. The 100 pages left is what's called the front matter. There's like 13 sections. I just list, we've just got 1, 2, and 9 here listed. But the front matter is like your points of contact, your information type, where it stays. Lots of sort of basic front matter. Also, it includes things like, and then they've got appendices like incident response plan and contingency plan. We're looking at trying to create templates for all of those too. And again, the templates we create we're trying to make them general purpose. They may or may not work for your organizations, but that's the beauty of Git. You can fork it and do whatever you want with it. Or if you see something that would make it more general, make a pull request, please. Of course, you've got to get it out there first. But we're committed to that. Here is this is actually OSCAL YAML for defining a GSA information type. It has confidentiality, integrity, and availability all defined as low. We feed that into a documentation template. This is actually Markdown, but for this particular piece of it, we had to use some HTML. And it creates documentation which has in it, well, at the bottom here you can see General Services Administration, confidentiality, integrity, and availability all low. This is an auto-generated document that could work as front matter. This all makes me very excited because I never want to write another one of those monsters by hand. I'll spend a lot more time writing this so I can, because as you saw, we have a bunch of clients, federal clients, and I have to write an ATO for every one of those. So I don't want to do that. That's why I'm interested in doing this. By the way, this little snippet of code is the entire bit of code that does that transformation takes the OSCAL YAML, feeds it into the template, and outputs that documentation. So it's a little bit of work, goes a long way. I'm very excited.
Is everything feeding into the template you were given for the SSE, or which template are you referring to?
We have a template for the front matter.
Mm-hmm.
We have a separate template for incident response plan. Oh, by the way, she's asking if what template? What
yeah.
template?
In my experience in the past, we were given a template and asked to use that template to
Yes.
prepare an SSP. So I'm trying to see if you were able to get this information into that template, or did you have your own?
That's a very good question. The question is, did everyone hear that? The problem is that, again, a cultural problem. I have not yet gotten an authorizing official, and I've worked with 6 of them, to look at a Git repository. They want their Word documents in the template they form. The worst one has been the Health and Human Services. I hope no one here works for them. But they have actually wanted things in exactly. They want not only the section numbers, which is somewhat understandable, but they want exactly the same font and everything exactly the same. And the reason, and I can sort of understand that, because as I mentioned before, the AO, the authorizing officials, are going to thumb to a particular set of to look up, IA5, because that's the one they're currently interested in. And if it looks like what they expect it to look like, it makes it easier for them. And yes, we are working at making Pandoc isn't the only system. There's a new system that we're looking at that just came out. I don't remember its name, but it actually takes a Word document and allows you to feed data directly into it. So you can have a template Word document and feed our data directly into it. And we need to do this now because that's what we have. Ultimately, once their EMAS and RSAM and CSAM systems have an API in them, and I hear that CSAM may be getting one. Once they have APIs, we can feed data directly into them. That'll be good. Until then.
So it looks like you had your own templates, you were not given anything, and you're not forced to use a template.
We have been forced to use templates for several clients. Like right now, we're updating one. We're actually updating some for the Department of Education, which needs templates in a particular format, and it's not helpful to anyone to have them in that format, but that's what they need. So, fortunately, I'm supposed to be doing that work right now. Unfortunately, I'm here, so someone else is doing that for me. And finally, automated evidence collection and control verification. To really do continuous authorization properly, you don't want to build great screenshots. You want a system that actually goes out there and tests the system, checks your values, and comes back and sees if those values match. We have a place in this HIPPA GRC system at the bottom there for evidence, for attaching evidence. Right now we're doing this manually, but this is all automated. This is all derived from YAML. We're looking at using Chef and Spec probably as our main platform for capturing information and feeding it into the system and checking it against the baseline. We'll have baseline buckets in S3. And yeah.
So are the attachments, are they still in the form of external screenshots, or it's output from the system?
We can do both.
Okay.
We can actually go out to the system because they like screenshots. We can use Selenium and create a screenshot automatically and feed that into the document. But we also, that will work for the Word document they have to put up there. What I want is also to grab the information in a machine readable form and check it and see if it's actually matching what I want it to match. So we have to do both. So security starts with people. One of the things we do at Civic Actions and work as much as we can with our clients to do is create a culture of security. At Civic Actions, everybody who comes in is required to use a password manager. We like I won't go into names. But we also recommend them for people's personal accounts. So because if somebody's personal bank account gets hacked, that's going to hurt their quality of life and hurt their production at our company. So we want people to use password managers everywhere. We also require two-factor authentication for privileged accounts, including the password manager, their email, and hopefully any other account we work on helping people understand that every place that can use two-factor auth, they should use it. We give everybody in the company a YubiKey and support them in also having backups. So, because if you use your YubiKey or your cell phone for your two-factor auth and you lose your YubiKey or your cell phone and you don't have a backup, you're in bad shape. So there are mechanisms for doing backups, and we regularly have announcements and help people, anyone who doesn't have backups for systems. And we work on making fishing expeditions fun. We have teams that try to find the try to see the fish that came in first. And there are some people in the content team that are trying to come up with wording and ways of tricking people into clicking on that link. So, and security is oftentimes a boring subject. We work at trying to make it fun as much as possible. We have a Slack channel. We do a lot of our work on Slack. And we have a Slack channel for security called Loving Security. And it's totally optional. Yeah, 74% of the company is subscribe to it. So ultimately, security demands agility. We can't, if you want security, you can't just do compliance. You need to go beyond that, and you've got to fight against not fight against. You've got to coexist with lovingly the culture that exists that requires things to be a certain way, and ultimately we'll get them to be more agile because things need to change daily. So our next steps: publishing our reusable components. I promise we're dedicated to open source, but we'll get them out there, and there's some links at the end where you can follow. We want to do evidence collection. This is our current area of research. We've already got an automated screenshot system. We've got some drush commands that are run by Chef and Spec for pulling out some things from Drupal. But we still need, hooking it all together. There's several different ways of doing it. We don't know which one's right, so we're trying a couple of different things. And maybe we'll do it wrong and somebody else will figure it out. Fine with me, but we need to get that one down. Building system security plans. One of the things that DevOps or DevSecOps tries to do is a concept of shift left. And the shift left concept is to move more of security stuff into the development frame. When we automate security, we can build the SSP and also do the evidence collection and checking all in the systems, all in this continuous integration pipeline, so that just like a developer gets results of their QA tests, they can get results of the security changes that they've made. And a new word monster created, if that's what needs to be happening. As I mentioned, NIST OSCAL, we're currently primarily using open control, but we're keeping our eye on OSCAL and embracing some of its data formats. FISMAtic is really cool. It's developed by a fellow, Aidan Feldman, who was at the Census Bureau. He's now moved over to GSA. It's a natural language processor that reads a system security plan and tells you and sort of says, oh, you're missing this, or you should maybe add information here. One reporter likened it to Clippy, the Microsoft Clippy, where it's like, it looks like you're trying to get an ATO. Would you like help with that? It's actually pretty cool. And it's all open source. GovReadyQ. We're working a lot with GovReady. They're actually the developers of the HIPPA GRC editor that I was showing. They also have a product called GovReadyQ, which is kind of like a TurboTax for an SSP. It asks you a bunch of questions and runs you through a process and at the end spits out a template of a system security plan. And we're advocating for the current proprietary and far too static data formats and communications protocols to be open source. Things like, as I mentioned, ACAS and HBSS. there need to be like reference applications on GitHub that anybody can access and see and update, because the threat landscape is changing constantly. Finally, if you're interested in transforming government, I'll just mention that the AGL is a nonprofit for this Agile government leadership, is a nonprofit for helping government modernize through shared knowledge and community. It's a really cool group. I think there might be an AGL talk at this conference, but I'm not actually sure about that. But if you want any more information about AGL, there are people at the Civic Actions table that know more about it than I do. And I'll get these links up online. These are some of the links pointing to some of the things I was talking about. And that's it. So thank you very much for coming. And does anyone else have any questions?
So I'm interested in securing my own Drupal instance, and so I suppose this would be a question to you and perhaps any other folks in the federal space in the room. But do you know of a good source to get like already secured Drupal settings files and things that would make it FISMA compliant that people have thought about already at a federal agency?
Yes, the question is about making Drupal already compliant. The compliance is code Drupal link, third from the bottom. That gives a lot of information for Drupal 7. It hasn't been updated to Drupal 8 yet. We're planning on updating it. I'm not much of a Drupler myself, but we have other people who are working on that. And that would be as close as I could get, because it will actually mention all the FISMA controls and what Drupal modules and settings should be set for setting that up. So that's probably as close as I can get for an answer.
Okay. So if anybody works in a federal agency and already has some pretty secured files, I'd be interested in speaking with you.
Well, thank you very much. You're all free 17 minutes early.